consuming.
And not and not very efficient. I mean, it takes so long that so something that you have to remember is you're still producing bitterness with your hops. Anything above, 170?
Yes.
Anything above 170 degrees with your wort, you're still producing some bitterness. So the longer it takes for you to get from 210 to even 170, you're getting even more bitterness. And an ice bath like that, it's taking you forever to get down to that point.
And another thing is, I mean, if you're not getting it down quick enough, you can develop chill haze.
Yes.
Which, I mean, isn't harmful, isn't the worst thing in the world, but definitely hurts the appearance of your beer.
Okay.
Michael's leaving us now.
No, I got to finish that order.
Okay.
Just grab the chair.
So, Brock is now joining us.
I was just going to join the two of you here. It looks like so much fun. How's everybody doing today? I hope pretty good. Hope everybody is weathering the storm here and making some great beers during this whole time.
And so, first off, Michael and I were talking about how when we first started brewing, some of the first way we chill our wort was, an ice bath.
Oh, in the sink, stir, keep it moving, that sort of thing. Usually about 45 minutes.
Yeah. And so it wasn't efficient, and then still there's a problem that you're still getting some bitterness from your hops because it's taken a while to get it down before that point, that point where you're still isomerizing the alpha acids and all that stuff.
Sure, and I think that's probably important that we talk about that just a little bit too, and so that people understand. Whenever you're given your hop additions, when you put them in at 60, that's your bittering hop, and then we get around the 15, 10, and we start getting these flavor and aroma hop additions, and usually the closer you are to flame out, you're getting more of just the aroma of that hop. So if we've put in these additions then, at 10 minutes or 5 minutes, and then it takes us 45 minutes for that wort to cool down, that essentially has become a bittering hop, and your beer is always going to have that kind of that bitter hop.
Correct, yeah. When I was first brewing, I didn't understand that. I thought 60 was just bittering, 30 was just flavor, and anything after that was just aroma. And I didn't think I was getting any bitterness from those hops afterwards, but you still are getting some bitterness. In fact, we actually did a big brew the other day in which all of the hops were put in.
We did 40-gallon brew.
Yeah, all the hops were actually put in after the boil was over, and so all of our bitterness is coming from the hops sitting in a whirlpool. For about 30 minutes, was it?
Yep. Well, I think we actually went a little bit long, but
okay.
Because we whirlpooled the whole time we were chilling. We were trying a new chilling method. In fact, we could talk about that in a little bit, maybe.
Yeah. So, it's important to try and chill it quickly. One, so that you're not continuing to get a whole lot more bitterness that you didn't plan for in your recipe, but then also to avoid chill haze. Now, chill haze is something it's not harmful. It doesn't make your beer taste bad or anything like that.
But it won't make your beer look good either.
No. And basically what that is you can have your beer at room temperature and it's clear and it's beautiful and it's that wonderful color that you wanted to achieve, but then you chill it down and there's all these little proteins, I think there are, aren't they?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That once they're chilled start making their appearance and clouding your beer up.
Now, I find that I hear most of this happening generally in your lagers, and a way to kind of ensure that the chill haze doesn't happen to you is that wherever you're lagering your beer at, if you lager it cooler than your serving temperature, a lot of times that will cause a chill haze, and that's why I've heard most of it. Have you heard any getting this chill haze in many ales?
Not many. I've once or twice, but it's not real common.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So one of the things is trying to you want to try and chill it down. Also, as with anything, we want to get it in that fermenter so that the yeast can start working on it. So nothing else floating around can get in it.
Sure. Well, and also, we had talked about, the hop and it being, if that hop is in there for such a long time, it bittering it. But what also going to happen is there's a lot of things that's happening. There's still reactions happening in that beer. And what we're looking to do is if I've got a recipe and I love this recipe and I love that beer that I just made, and I want to get some consistency on the next batch and have that exact beer, and so I can dial that in. All of these reactions are still happening in there while that's still hot. Polyphenols are lining up. There's all kinds of protein coagulation, all kinds of things that are happening in there, and we want to shut that process down as fast as we possibly can, because we're looking for some consistency between our beers.
Correct. Well, so as time goes on, you start realizing, you need more efficient or better ways to chill your beer, and you're ready to maybe make a little bit of an investment. And, you begin to realize, it's important for me to be able to chill this, and maybe you're tired of buying sacks of ice and stirring constantly for 45 minutes to try and chill it down. And so a lot of times the next thing we do is we start looking at ways of chilling our wort. In particular, we begin to look at wort chillers. Now, there's here in front of us, we've got 3 of the most common types of wort chillers. We've got a plate chiller, we've got a counterflow chiller, and we've got 2 kinds of immersion chillers, a stainless steel and a copper. Now, Brock, when you're brewing, what do you use for chilling your wort?
I think the first and probably the most inexpensive method to go from this, sink full of ice that you've got your pot in that you stirred, is to go with the chiller. Now, I've always used a copper chiller, and as I understand, why would I want to use a copper instead of a stainless steel or vice versa?
That's a good question. I've always used copper, and one of the reasons I've liked copper was because of the fact that copper is a much better conductor of heat, and because of that, then as your wort chiller is working, it cools it down a lot faster. Now, maybe we ought to explain a little bit about what actually happens with an immersion chiller. So the way an immersion chiller works is you have water coming into one end of the chiller, and you'll see it, kind of in the picture here. It comes in here, and then it goes through the copper tubing, and it goes all the way through there, and the copper tubing is in contact with your wort, and heat is exchanged, and so cold water comes in or cool water comes in, and then actually warm water or hot water comes out. So there's a heat exchange that's happening here.
What are these? These are about $65, I think. So I've already got my pot, and I've already got my ice. Oh, this was the stainless one. But what you can do is, what I always like to do is clean it first. And then I've got my rolling boil going. So usually about the last 15 minutes, I always just went ahead and dropped my chiller right into the pot. And that made sure to sanitize everything.
Correct.
Okay. And then so I still took my pot, put it down into the sink of ice, and then you hook this guy right up to your sink. So it's not a big addition to what you were already doing. You didn't have to change or get a lot of extra stuff. And this is a really great way to chill your beers. And I know I took out the stainless one. I've heard people say that they would use stainless if they did a lot of very acidic things.
Okay.
So that's what I had heard between the two, not only the conduction. So I just wanted to put that in there.
I've heard that too.
So now it comes with this garden hose thing, but we do carry a part that's a garden hose to sink adapter, which is really nice. So you would just put this into your sink in the cold water and run this over to your other sink, correct? And turn that on, and it's just going to transfer that heat, right? So you get a nice flow. And I've found maybe it would drop that 45-minute time to about 20 minutes, 15, 20 minutes, something in there.
Sometimes, although sometimes we'd have, and we'll kind of focus in on this a little bit later, but if you're, depending upon where you live, sometimes your groundwater can come out pretty warm. Like I'm guessing, up where you grew up, up in God's country.
I'm from Montana, so.
Up there in God's country.
The groundwater's a little cooler, yeah. We can sell our beers in the basement without any sort of refrigeration, so that's
which
really
is nice
too. Yeah, indeed.
Whereas here in Texas, groundwater pretty most times of the year is coming out pretty warm. During the summer months, we can get water coming out of the tap close to 75, 80 degrees. And then during the winter, it might cool down, I don't know, maybe low 60s, you think, or high 50s?
Yeah, sometimes it can get a little cooler than that here, I've found. And
Okay.
usually during the wintertime, I don't have much problem chilling my beer.
Yeah.
Which is nice, but everybody that's brewed here in Texas during the summertime knows that it's very, very difficult to chill that beer with just the groundwater. So there are a lot of things that we can do to ensure that we get that a little bit colder.
Correct. So one thing, should we go into that, or would you like to go into the other chillers first?
Maybe we should just explain the other.
Okay. So we'll go into how to deal with the warm groundwater here in a little bit. But another type of chiller is the plate chiller. Now, sometimes a plate chiller can be popular for some people because one, it's pretty compact. It can be kind of heavy. I mean, this is a big piece of metal. I've seen a lot of people like it because it is able to chill work down pretty quickly.
I use a plate chiller myself.
Okay.
And I've had one of these Blickmans as well.
Okay.
I actually have a larger unit that I bought now that I can take apart now. It cools very, very fast, and what's nice about it is you can take your wort straight out of the pot, and when it comes out of the other side of this, you can go right into your fermenter. So that makes it optimal. Again, as long as the groundwater isn't 75 degrees, right? Because we're trying to cool it a little closer. I will say that with the plate chiller, although it works very well and it cools very efficiently and very quickly, you have to be really careful about getting proteins, hot break, and also hot particulate in there, because it will clog up that plate. Very, very close where that wort moves through there. So you have to do some things like I always use a hop spider, and then on the bottom of my bucket too, on the other side of the ball lock, I like to have another filter of some sort of bazooka filter or something. So I have a couple levels to keep my hops out of my plate chiller.
Okay. I've heard some people say that with plate chillers, you got to be very careful to clean them really well. Is that true? And if so, how do you clean your plate chiller?
Again, so with the Blickman here, it's welded together, so I can't actually take the plates apart.
Okay.
So I want to keep everything out of there that I possibly can, and usually what I'll do is I will hook it up to the hose or just use my sprayer, and I'll spray through one way very, very well, then through the other way, and vice versa. Probably 2 or 3 times until that's really, really clear water coming out of the other side.
Okay.
And then I'll usually do like a star sand, something that's got a little phosphoric acid in there or something like that. But again, we don't want to leave that that acid sitting in there, so a good rinse after that.
And the way the plate chillers work is you've got your wort coming in one way, and you've got water coming in the other way. So again, it's again that heat exchange. It's happening between the two materials, and I think a lot of wort chillers have copper in them, right? Or are they stainless steel mostly?
I've seen a lot of stainless steel ones. This one I believe does have some copper.
Okay. And so, I mean, you got to make sure you keep it really clean. But I've known some people love their plate chillers and do really well with the plate chillers.
That's what I use on anything. If I'm going to do anything over 5 gallons, I like to usually use a plate chiller just because of the quickness in which it works. Again, as long as you have your groundwater is not 75, 80 degrees.
Yeah.
So how about the counterflow?
Now a counterflow chiller, and this is another one that we also carry. Counterflow chiller is interesting. What you have here is you have a series of pipes, and these I believe are all stainless steel. And so you have actually a pipe inside of a pipe. And the way it works is your wort, it gets pumped through one or drained through one, because you can do it by gravity.
Yep.
Your wort goes passing through one, whereas water is passing the exact opposite direction. So what we have here is again an exchange of heat between your hot wort and your cold groundwater. And so water will come in one way, cool or cold, comes out the other way hot. Wort comes in one way, more hot, comes out the other way cool. So again, this is heat exchange. I've seen, this one we have the counterflow chillers can be a little pricier.
They can.
This one's about $230.
And again, that's a stainless steel, so
Yeah.
I mean, stainless is pretty expensive.
True.
I know one comes with the Grainfather unit. I've had really good luck with that too, and I believe it's just a copper tube with a vinyl tubing on the outside of it.
Yeah.
So they're different methods that you can use. Now, how about the flow of water? I mean, how fast do I need? How slow do I usually, I'm going to want a thermometer coming out of it so that I can tell what I've cooled to, right?
Correct.
But then on my cold water coming in, what is the best, does that need to be rip-roaring through there, or does it need to be moving really slow, or?
What I've done, I mean, I've only used a counterflow chiller a handful of times.
Okay.
But usually what I've done is I've tried to do it so that the water that's flowing through it is flowing through it, not super fast, not full blast, not just a trickle either. I usually go kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
So that you make sure that you're exchanging, heat between the cold water and
Sure.
the wort itself. If you just turn it on full blast and all that's coming out is cold water, you're wasting water and not really doing a good job.
You're not getting that heat transfer if that water isn't, and it should. If you have it set up properly, the water coming out the other side should be hotter, more hot than the wort going into it, actually. And you do need a good amount of flow in there, I've noticed. So if it's flowing too light in there, it'll just sit there and absorb that heat. It's not really going to take it and move it away. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah, it does. And I guess it'd probably be the same for your plate
Absolutely.
chiller too.
Yep.
Okay. Awesome. Now I've actually seen even people make their own counterflow chiller out of a garden hose and copper tubing, and you kind of bend it around and made it exactly what they want.
Sure.
It's copper tubing isn't always expensive, but a lot of people have an old garden hose around they don't mind parting with.
Well, that's what's awesome about brewing beer is I love to see all of the invention and the engineering that goes into this. I mean, because we have some brewers that that have the most simple method and make absolutely phenomenal beer, and I have other guys that have just taken this to the nth degree and are just not very good brewers. And of course the other way is too, I've got guys that have these crazy elaborate systems. They're fantastic brewers and they can tell you every single reason they do every little thing, and it makes a lot of sense. I mean,
true. Yeah, I've seen the same thing, and I've seen some people sink thousands of dollars into their equipment and they're not making really good beer.
and still have a terrible beer.
Yeah. So necessarily, find what works for you. Actually, the method I use is an immersion chiller. I've been using an immersion chiller for years. I guess my preference with the immersion chiller is that I like it because I can clean it. I can get in there, and if there's anything hiding anywhere, like I'll make a Belgian wit where you'll get the orange peel and coriander seeds kind of stuck here and there, and I can scrub all that out, spray it out, and get it clean. Whereas I guess I always get a little nervous that if I can't see what's in here, is it really clean?
Well, indeed. But we do have some great cleansers and stuff out there, and as long as you have a good process and you work very, very clean. Again, with the counterflow chiller and especially with the plate chiller, like I said, you want to take steps to make sure that you keep a lot of this out of your chiller, a lot of those things out of there, before it even gets to that point. Which is also a nicer thing because you're getting a clear beer on the other side.
Yeah.
So
we've got these types of chillers. Is there any other? Those are the only types of chillers I know of. Can you think of any offhand?
I'm sure that there's probably something.
Yeah, there may be some other things out there. Now, and a challenge for us here in Texas, and maybe some of y'all who live in other warmer states, is trying to chill when your groundwater is warm. Or even trying to chill when your ambient temperature, so the temperature that you're maybe outside brewing in is 102, and it's not easy. And also we're going to kind of be conscious about the fact of not just pouring hundreds of gallons of water down the drain and watching your water bill go through the roof.
Absolutely.
And also
and to be good to the planet.
Correct. So we're going to cover next the idea of how do you chill your beer
What's a basement?
when yeah.
A basement is a thing that was built underneath of your house. It actually has more rooms in it. It's fantastic.
Something we don't have normally here in Texas, but in the great state of Montana,
That's funny.
they've got it.
I bought a water, found this immersion pump, and put a bucket of ice water. Yeah. So we're going to kind of get to that. So
Some things you can do if you have very warm groundwater, or even if you're having trouble because you want to get your wort down as low as possible. So maybe you want to get it to pitching temp. You're making a lager and you want to get it down to 50 degrees or cooler.
Right.
That's not easy to do. There are some options. You can actually use, for instance, if you're using an immersion chiller, or even if you were using a counterflow chiller or a plate chiller, you can get what's called a pre-chiller. Which the idea behind that would be that you're pre-chilling your water that's going into your wort chiller. And some advantages to that is suddenly you can have ice cold water coming in.
Yeah, and I think like an easy way to do that too is, let's say that I've had something like this, and then I wanted to graduate down the line. You can kind of use them in conjunction. So I can just take a bucket of ice water, drop my immersion chiller in there, pump my water through this, and then into my Wort chiller.
Correct.
Right?
You can. Now, kind of a thing with that I've found, and I think Brock's probably found the same thing, and it was something which on our big brew day we probably should have done a little differently because.
So we had an old Keyser that we did 40 gallons of beer. So we filled this old Keyser with water, and we chilled it down the night before. It chilled to about 41 degrees. And we actually were using this very chiller right here, and then just recirculating through that. We had a difficult time getting it low enough.
Yeah.
We were trying to get it to pitching temperature, and we did a lager, so
We didn't quite get there.
we had some difficulties. And even though the water that was going back into the Keyser was still being cooled, it just couldn't keep up.
No, it couldn't. So one thing you can do, and I've done this before with actually some pretty good results, is before you try and pre-chill your water. So before you would use your immersion chiller or something like that to put it in an ice bath, you actually just run your regular groundwater. I mean, even if your groundwater's 85 degrees, you can knock that down from boiling down to well below 160 pretty quick.
Pretty quick.
And then once you've gotten there, say around 120, 110, something like that, what I usually do is then I switch over to either the pre-chiller in order to pre-chill the water that's coming through your counterflow or your plate chiller, or even if you have one for your immersion chiller. Or there's another way that you can do it, which is kind of what we did on Sunday. Once you've used just your regular groundwater, then you would turn to pumping the water through through an ice bath. So basically, what you do, and actually somebody on here put
a huge bucket of ice in there.
Yeah. For that, you're going to need a pump. Now, actually, Daniel on chat was talking about the fact that he bought a water fountain, a submersion pump, to put it in a bucket of ice. That's actually a great way to do it. Get one of your, get an old bucket from Home Depot, or maybe one of ours that you bought here from Texas Brewing, and you make an ice bath out of it. And so as your water is going into, you put that little pump down in there and move the water from there through your chiller, and then it goes right back into the bucket.
Right back into the bucket, into the ice bucket. And I mean, we have to use ice here in Texas, and that's what we ended up doing too. After we had pumped out, we were recirculating, so we'd pumped out, and we knocked it down quite a bit. It took a little while to get there. While we were boiling our hops as well, but we had to go get an enormous chest of ice and throw in there so that we could get it down. But again, now we have to buy a pump, right, of some sort, so that we can move all this through, or do we? I actually started, and I went and I bought me a nice plate chiller, had it all hooked up to my system, gravity fed into my plate chiller, and came back, and it was in the middle of summer, I just wasn't getting it cool enough even to go into my fermenter at that time. So I grabbed a couple of our old mash tuns, like we had showed you on a previous, or even just a couple of coolers. And what we did was we just made a gravity system. So I took these big mash tuns that already had these nice ball locks on, and I had two of them. So we just sat one up, filled that sucker with ice, and we funneled that down into another one that we had filled with ice. And then this came out, went straight into my plate chiller. So I had a gravity system set up. So the other side of my plate chiller, I'm collecting into a bucket.
Okay.
I'm taking the hot water and I'm pouring it on the first bucket of ice. Okay. So by the time that water's getting to here, I'm almost never losing my ice that's in here. Now I would, over the course of a 10-gallon brew, lose all of my ice in the first chamber there, if you will.
Sure.
But I still had plenty of ice and plenty of cold water that was coming out of there. Worked great. Worked like a charm, and we did it that way for years.
Nice.
Absolutely for years. Again, buying ice.
Yeah.
You're buying ice for every brew, but I had a large size freezer that was there that we just packed up with ice when we found it for cheap, and that's what we did.
Yeah. What you could also do, what I've done is, you take your 2-liter bottles of old, sodas, or an old milk jug, and you fill that thing full of ice or full of water. Freeze it.
freeze it.
And you can stick those in your cooler as well.
Oh, it's going to work great.
Yeah, and that'll help you save a little bit on going to the Goofy Ice machine or the grocery store and buying ice. So there's always some ways to do it, and I hadn't thought about that. That's pretty neat, little gravity fed system you had there.
Worked fantastic.
Nice. So those are a couple of ways in which you can also pre-chill or get things down, especially in warmer climates. I don't know if we have any questions. I haven't seen any besides what's a basement.
No, I think everybody's just hanging out, chilling with us today.
Oh. But the question is does the size of your chiller matter?
Oh, I suppose that could be debatable.
Okay. Sometimes it can. Because you'll actually find that there's some chillers that are pretty big. We're bringing the change my mind sign back out after Friday. Woo! If you missed it, Friday's episode was on whether it is secondary or not. You can check that one out too. But there's with chilling your wort, there's lots of ways to do it. You can buy chillers that have more, like for instance, we have the copper one that has even more copper coils to it. So you're getting more surface area and more exposure to your wort. This is especially good if you're going to start doing larger batches.
Yeah, if I got a 10-gallon batch, this little guy is just not going to cool that down for me. I'm definitely going to need something with a lot more coil. And I also found, even when we did the big batch on Saturday, it was almost so restricted going from that 1.5 inch flexible hose that we're using down to this 1/2 inch, which I even think it's smaller than that on the inside. The outside looks like a 1/2 inch coil. And we were finding that it just wouldn't move through there fast. I think it was too restricted to really get that heat exchange that we really needed. So something larger or another set of coils perhaps could have moved a little bit more of that heat away. So I think size matters.
In many ways it does. I mean, and so, but just starting out, one of the, a great investment is just buying one of these very basic immersion chillers. You can get one for relatively inexpensive and see how it works.
Chest freezer.
And that was Stubby in the background. Today is Taco Tuesday at the shop. And
happy Cinco de Mayo, everyone.
And his wonderful wife and Stubby brought some tacos for us today.
Tacos.
So
yeah, Jason says he hasn't used his wort chiller yet. Jason, I think it is absolutely a fantastic step, and it's just going to help you make better beer.
Yes.
All of these things that we were showing you are just little steps. Take one at a time, improve that beer that you're making.
Then, Jason, as you start using the wort chiller, especially with your immersion, one of the benefits of that, as we were mentioning a little bit earlier, I think Brock said it, is as you chill it down and you get it close to the temperature that you want it to be. What you can do at that point is gently take your immersion chiller out and stick your lid on your kettle. Now, what's going to happen is everything will begin to settle in there. So your hops, your cold break, everything will settle down to the bottom, and you just give it. I usually do about 20 to 30 minutes.
Okay.
Gives me time enough to clean a few things that I need to clean, and get my carboy sanitized and some stuff like that. And then what you can do.
You don't do that before, Jeff?
Not always. Sometimes I wait. Sometimes like, oh, nuts! I forgot to sanitize my carboy.
I think that's happened to all of us.
Yeah, it happens. Or, you can relax, have a home brew, and kind of enjoy the time. And what I'll do is then I'll let it sit. And then what'll happen is as I'm bringing it off my kettle, so I'll open the valve on my kettle.
Hey, your buddy Matt's watching.
Oh, nice.
What's up, Matt?
Very nice, Matt. So what I will do is then I will actually open up my valve carefully, and I'll allow the first little bit to come off, and I get some hot break and cold break, some proteins and hops and things like that that come out. But then very quickly I get crystal clear wort that comes out.
This is what's settled from leaving that pot, letting that cold break just come out there first. Yeah. Okay, and that's a good idea. Maybe even if you're using this plate chiller or something like that, to let some of that off first, so that you can keep that plate chiller, cleaner.
Yeah, that can be very helpful. So yeah, as you are beginning to.
Matt says hi.
Hi, Matt. So definitely, Jason, as you start using your immersion chiller, those are some benefits. Make sure you try and keep it clean. You were saying earlier, Brock, that you clean your immersion chiller. How do you clean? I mean, do you just spray it off real quick, or do you scrub it down, or?
Yes, yeah, I do. I just use a little bit of Brew Clean
Okay.
or PBW, whatever you have on hand. It's a great cleaner, and it doesn't have to be fantastic. Obviously, we're going to put it on a Wort to sanitize it, but I don't want a bunch of gunk on here. I don't want to pull out this copper immersion chiller that's been sitting in my garage and has oxidized or any of this.
You don't want it brown and green?
No, I don't want it brown and green when I'm just going to plop that guy in my beer. Again, we're trying to make the best beer that we possibly can. So just a little PBW and a scrubby works really goes a long ways just before you put that into your beer. So
Along those lines too, make sure that you always inspect your hoses as they're connected. You'll notice on these chillers, whether it be the stainless or the copper, that there are these little worm clamps that are on there. You might inspect it to make sure it's tight enough. My buddy Nick was actually, when he was brewing for a long time, he actually had a number of batches, couldn't figure out why his batches were going wrong, and took a break for a while, and finally told me, he said, look, I want to come back to it, but watch and see what I do, tell me what I'm doing wrong. So I watched him. His sanitation was great, all of his his process was good. I mean, everything was spot on. And then as we were just kind of watching the chiller go on and stuff like that, I looked over at the pot and I thought, God, that pot looks a little fuller than it used to. And I thought, it must be my imagination. So I started walking over there and I was kind of looking at it and I'm like, no, it's definitely, there's more to it.
it's increasing.
It's increasing. Your wort's not supposed to grow.
Oh, I can see. So I've got this in my sink then. This isn't tight enough and it's just squirting water back into your beer.
Well, his wasn't really squirting. I mean, it just had a small little stream coming down.
Huh?
And
yeah, but over 20 minutes, I mean, that's something.
Yeah.
Plus, this is a really good place for mold and things in between, because if it was wet and there, oxygen is allowed to get in there, mold can grow. Again, we're gonna chill this beer down. Just because it's boiling at the time and it gets sanitized, as we chill this down. If there's something like some mold or some bacteria growing in there, perhaps could be an area in which you could infect your beer.
Correct. So inspect it before you put it in. Make sure it's clean. Maybe grab your little flathead screwdriver. Make sure that everything's nice and tight.
And I would say that would go for all of these as well.
Yes.
If I'm going to put Wort through a plate chiller, through through a counterflow chiller, I want to make sure that that's clean and sanitized before I do. And there's several different ways that you can do that.
Okay. Matt actually had a good suggestion there. He said both Brew Clean or PBW works great for cleaning out plate and counterflow chillers, as Brock was saying earlier. And if you can get a pump or afford a pump to recirculate it for a bit, it cleans it really well.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. I'd agree, Matt, 100%. Also, there was a little tip here from the would-be brewmaster.
Oh.
He says the hot discharge water is great for cleaning, which if you can, be good to our planet and cut down on your water usage at all. You've got this hot water that's coming out the other side. If I got a pot or something, my brew kettle or mash tun, whatever, that nice hot water coming out of there will absolutely work great for cleaning.
What you can also do, actually, Matt, who's on here, used to do this when in our home brewing days together. He got himself a long length of garden hose and hooked it up to the hot output of his wort chiller, and then put the water sprinkler on various parts of his yard.
Okay.
And by the time it'd get out there, I mean, it could still be pretty warm.
Okay.
But he put the water sprinkler on, it sprayed up in the air, and for the first probably about a minute or two, it was just steam.
Coming out of there?
Steam kind of coming out. But very quickly, he'd use that and he'd water his lawn and water his trees.
Yeah, fantastic.
It worked really well.
Anything besides just dumping it down the curb or
Yeah.
or something like that, for sure.
Yeah.
Anytime that we can collect and reuse in the brewing process is a good thing. Just because it's a byproduct for us doesn't mean that that it's unusable. A lot of these breweries, they'll give their spent grains to. It still has great protein in it for the animals and livestock, and the farmers always like that sort of stuff too. So, in fact, I had some home brewers that came up and they were using spent grains to make dog treats. My dog loved them. She kept bringing them to me. They were absolutely fabulous. It was like, what a great idea. All natural, So
Actually, Jean has a recipe for some that she makes.
okay, sure.
And it's like eggs, flour, I think some peanut butter, and she bakes it. And
Oh, my dog absolutely went bonkers
Oh, yeah.
over them. They're great.
And it's a great way to reuse it. I have some other friends, Amanda Long and Jarrett Long. They actually use their spent grains to feed their chickens, and so they have fresh eggs too. So as homebrewers, we can be, one of the great things is being creative, trying to find more ways of using things and reusing things.
For sure, for sure. Well, do you have anything else here to cover? I don't see any other questions coming in.
No, I don't see any either. And so, well, with that, again, kind of to recap, if you can have a way, when you move to be finding ways to chill your wort, an immersion chiller is a great way to start. As you kind of, are able to move up, you're enjoying the hobby even more. Counterflow chillers and plate chillers are great too. Find what works for you. Keep it clean.
Keep it clean. Yep,
And-
keep it clean.
And have fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Find a way. That's the awesome part of brewing. I love the engineering part, and I love the finished product.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of different ways to get there. So, like Jeff was saying, just find what works best for your situation, and also the equipment that you have, and go from there.
Yeah. And thank you so much for watching. We appreciate y'all watching, and we appreciate your
Cedric,
orders.
do you have anything you'd like to add?
Cedric, our seltzer and kombucha expert, is in the background.
Yes, my mother loves Cedric. Would you like to say hello?
Hi, how are you? Thank you. No.
Okay, thanks, Cedric.
Is that the end of it? What else are we doing? What are we
No,
talking
that's
about
it.
tomorrow?
We were just thanking the people again. Thank you all for your support and continuing to allow us to keep our jobs, which is wonderful.
Yes, it's our pleasure.
During this time, but really all the support. And I just love seeing all the new home brewers that are out there that are getting going. So any questions, you can call any one of us here at the shop. We have an online chat. There are many ways.
And check out our beer kits. We have new kits coming out here and there. We did one for the Big Brew Day that you could check out. That we have some recommendations for.
Yep.
And
Jeff, you've been very implemental in putting together a lot of our new kits, and we've got some. I think the Deacon Gym is absolutely fantastic.
Thanks.
You guys should brew it up. It's a Belgian
Believe it.
single. We drank through a keg of it like it was nobody's business. It's a great beer. And he's been coming up with a lot of good recipes, and we're going to have a lot more coming too. We're going to have a lot of Muntins recipes that we're
Yeah.
about to put together, so those are some things to look forward to.
And then also the one that we did this past weekend is from our friends at Cowtown. They gave us some guidance in a beer that we will release as a kit, hopefully in the very near future.
It's a fantastic IPL,
Yeah.
which is a
And-
style that you don't see a lot, but is fantastic.
Oh, it's spectacular.
But it can be an IPA too.
Oh yeah,
It can be whatever you want it to
Absolutely.
an IPS.
be. An IPS. I love
Yes,
that.
we did a Saison, we did a BPA, we did.
A
We had
couple
40
Belgian
gallons of this stuff,
strands.
so we decided to mess around a bit.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of stuff. If there are ideas or that you have for shows or questions you want us to address, we're more than happy to do what we can, and we're happy to be here with you. And I think tomorrow's show we're looking at possibly doing wine making or mead making.
Oh yeah.
And so kind of an introduction to both of those. So we will talk a little bit about that tomorrow. But we also have coming up this week, trying to remember some of the other ones we've got coming up.
We've got a long list of shows coming up. And
Yes.
It's going to be fantastic. So
Got lots
please
more
tune
stuff
in.
coming your way.
Yes. No. As always, we just remind you guys to stay safe out there and to stay home and brew it.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.